Thanks, guys. My name is Michaelis, and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Natalie, for asking me to talk about this stuff. Okay. Well, I guess like my first pointer about working with people and people being in their fourth step and their fifth step and their sixth step is, and their seventh step is, it's really, you'll see why it's really necessary to, even though you might feel like you're filled with people that you're working with, to always be looking for people to work with. Because there have been times in my sort of my early days of doing this process where I had a group of people, like the first 4 people that I was working with kind of all hit the fourth step and the fifth step and that whole time, like all around the same time. And I found that, well, a lot of people procrastinate on their fourth step.
Really?
So people, yeah, it's amazing. So people sort of disappear, and the fifth step takes some time, you know. So during that time, I found myself not being in all parts of the book, you know. So I would have like some days off where I wasn't necessarily working with someone, and I really realized how I was not treating myself through those days, you know. So no matter what, no matter how many people I think I'm working with and how full I think my schedule is or whatever, I'm always making sure that I'm constantly looking for more people, saying yes to new people, so that there's just a constant stable. Because I mean, a lot of people disappear in Bill's story. I have people that have been on Bill's story for the last 3 years, and still see me, run to me in Bali and be like, I've almost finished it, you know, which is amazing. And, you know, the same thing happens with the inventory sometimes, although the inventory, I think the longest that I've waited for that was maybe 2 years, but it happens. So again, just continue to look for people to work with all the time. The universe will sort of take care of that number of people and allow you to be always working with the amount of people that you need to be working with. The defects of character. How I was introduced to that was, I think I was around 8 years sober. And yeah, it didn't come from this book study, actually. I had done a Hazelden 4-step guide, which is a epic inventory process that's super in depth and more of an essay format style of inventory. And it's just a bunch of questions, like 190 something questions. It's ridiculous. And it's really almost like psycho immersive. It talks about all kinds of really crazy stuff. And the sponsor that I was working with at the time, you know, I'm sure some of you guys have seen these worksheets of defects of character that have like, you know, 100 forms of self written on there, and it just gets really overwhelming. And so what he had done is what he had learned was to sort of pull out the 7 deadly sins, just to sort of consolidate defects of character. It wasn't anything religious, it wasn't anything biblical, even though they have, you know, that connotation, but it was more about simplifying defects of character. You know, so really understanding what pride is and how it manifests itself. And, you know, so pride is self-centered thinking. Pride is thinking that I'm right. Pride is, you know, me trying to get away with doing the least amount to get to where I want to go. Pride is, you know, thinking that I'm better or less than. Pride is, whatchamacallit, arrogance. Pride is also the pride in reverse, which is the low self-esteem, the self-pity. Anger is not just, you know, literally being angry at somebody, but it's the character assassination, and it's the gossip. Looking at gluttony and understanding that gluttony is not just with food. Gluttony is just wanting more than what's due to us, you know, and looking at that as, you know, even with validation seeking or attention seeking, you know, it's gluttonous behavior, gluttonous thinking patterns. Greed was really pretty much anything that had to do with stuff with money, where I'm selling out my integrity for financial or material gain, you know. So that is, stealing, padding the expense accounts, doing stuff like that. Sloth is, anything from just plain old laziness to procrastination to, what they talk about in the 12 and 12, which is, even working really hard right now so I can do nothing later. That idea. Lust has anything to do with, selling out my integrity for sex, or even the idea of love, because what I learned later on that, love is something that really has nothing to do with sex at all. It's not even really a feeling. It's more of an action and a behavior, how I treat people around me. And for me, it's an unconditional thing. Looking at envy is, jealousy. Again, it's also the comparing myself, and you can kind of see how pride overlaps with the envy a bit. Did I forget any? I might have, but you guys kind of sort of get the picture, right?
Oh,
so it's
sloth.
basically.
Or no, you did say sloth.
I did say sloth.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I greed, gluttony, envy, yeah, I think I might have done them all. But anyway, so that was the main objective, was to sort of simplify stuff and take these, overwhelming worksheets and just boil down defects to the 7 deadly sins, so that when it's coming to that whole 7-step stuff where, and this is how I used to do 6 and 7. So basically what I would do is after I finished my inventory, I would tally up all of my defects of character and basically just count, how many prides did I have? How many envies did I have? How many angers did I have? And, for the defects that were more glaring, I would copy them on little pieces of paper 15 times over. And the defects that were less glaring, I would copy them over like 12 times over. And I put them on little pieces of paper and I throw them in a jar. And every morning I'd pick out 2 defects. So let's say I get my pride and my anger. If I picked out the same 2 defects, I would, put one back and pick out another. So I had 2 different that I was working on. And basically, what I would do is that throughout the day, I would try to be aware of a defective character. And if I was aware of it, I would say the 7-step prayer and try to take some contrary action. And that's basically how I worked step 6 and 7 once I started working step 6 and 7. For the first 8 years of my sobriety, step 6 and 7 were just kind of an enigma, and I didn't really do anything for them. And, I actually wasn't really changing too much either. So this actually felt like I was doing something, which was cool. I felt like I was actually putting effort into these steps, which seemed very vague. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, that did not really work in the long run, because when I'm trying to manage my defects of character through this action, I'm also emotionally tethered to the results of the defects of character and when they leave, and for me, I'm someone who can easily slip into morbid reflection and start beating myself up when I'm not as healthy as I think that I should be based on the amount of time sober that I am. And that's a really dangerous place for me to be in, because it makes me question God, whether or not God is really working in my life, or God cares about me, or God wants to help me remove these defects. It makes me question whether or not the program of Alcoholics Anonymous works. And it makes me question, basically whether I'm just a hopeless mess or not, So that sucks a lot. So fast forward to basically the book study. And when I started doing that, there were certain things that I started to understand through working this process. The first thing is that as soon as I started taking people through the book, I started feeling relief from myself when I was in the process of being in the book with people. So for that hour or so, I would feel relief. I wouldn't be thinking about myself. And then there were certain tidbits in the book that sort of allowed me to let go of some of the shame, guilt, and, self-judgment that I was carrying. Like that little line in Bill's story that says, the spirit of the universe knows neither time nor limitation. And I basically applied that to myself. Okay, cool. So this thing that I'm trying to connect to through, taking other people through the book knows neither time nor limitation. Then there's no limit as to how much I can grow. There's no limit. I mean, they talk about in the 6th step in the 12 and 12 about, or maybe it's the 7th step about striving for perfection, even though we may not reach that, like we set our sights on that, so letting go of those sort of self-limiting beliefs of where we think that we can get to and really being open to growing to as much as we can, right? So that was one aspect of, the spirit of the universe knows no limitation. The time aspect means that if God is not, basically confined by the concept of time, then there's no real time frame to which this happens, which means that, my defects basically leave when they leave, and that's not really my business at all. And managing my defects is not my business either. So that was one thing that helped me. The other thing was, they talk about it in the book about, self-centeredness, self being the root of my problem, right? So if self is the root of my problem, then selflessness has to be the root of my solution, Also, the doctor's opinion, the doctor talks about, nothing has contributed to the rehabilitation of these men more than the altruistic movement growing up in them. So that's the idea of altruism or selflessness really being the thing that changes me, right? So, and then looking at this whole thing of, the only thing that's going to bring about recovery for me, and recovery, not just staying sober, recovery, mind, body, and spirit, is a spiritual experience, right? And a spiritual experience is a God-powered personality change, which means that I need to have the power of God in order to make that change. And the circle and the triangle lets me know that how I treat my spirit, or how I perfect and enlarge my spiritual life, or how I develop and gain access to the power of God is through working as many people as I possibly can. So kind of putting all this stuff together, my 6th and 7th step turned on a different path, basically. And it was a much more laissez-faire version of 6 and 7. So when I first read 6 and 7 in the book, when I first got sober, I remember feeling really frustrated. And that's why I was talking about these steps being really vague, because I mean, really it's, 6th step is done by going over my inventory and seeing if I've left anything out. And that's basically it. And the 7th step is, saying a prayer. And then all of a sudden I'm launching into this, 8th and 9th step amends thing. And I was kind of like, okay, cool. Well, what happens now? Like, how does this change happen? But in doing this process, and it's really important to be working with people as you're going through this process. Like, everything is contingent on that, because that's the only way that step 6 and 7 is actually going to make sense to you. Because if you're not working with people from day one, then all these promises that you read in this book, including when you get to the 9th step promises, which are so famously read at so many meetings, they're not going to resonate with you, because how can selfishness and self-seeking flip away if you haven't been practicing selfishness, selflessness, So anyway, taking people through the book, this is how I have basically taken on step 6 and 7. So I make my relationship with God the most important thing in my life, and I allow God to do the rest, right? How do I develop my relationship with God? It's with working with as many people as I possibly can. Now, how does that logically work with step 6 and 7? Well, if the whole purpose of this process is to teach me how to become the blessing, so I need to practice becoming the blessing through practicing blessing others, and the book is basically a tool that I use to start that practice, then defects of character start to get removed. Because when I am practicing the blessing, I'm not thinking about whether or not I'm better than less than you. When I'm practicing being the blessing, I'm not thinking about, my resentment towards you. When I'm trying to bless you, I'm not thinking about ways to, take advantage of you sexually. when I'm trying to bless you, I'm not concerned about seeking validation from you, or, stealing from you, or trying to cut corners in life, or, basically what I found was that the more that I'm practicing being the blessing, the more I'm practicing behaviors and thought patterns that are opposite of defect or character. So that's the logic of it, and that's basically how I've started to implement step 6 and 7 in my life today. So basically, I don't do anything in terms of managing defects in detail, or any sort of direct management. My life today is all about how can I bless whatever's in front of me in each moment. And that is, the work that I do to connect to God. And the other thing is that when I'm doing that, I'm not managing myself, I'm not managing my life, I'm not managing my defects. I'm actually giving the universe in that space of non-management the opportunity to bless me, to take care of my life, to take care of me, and to take care of my defect. So I don't pick any defects out of a jar anymore. I don't beat myself up anymore for, acting any certain way. And I basically give it up all to God. And how I give that up to God is just by focusing on how can I be the blessing in this moment. That's it. It's really that simple. Now, again, this is a practice. So that means that and it's a process, which means that it's not an overnight matter. I wasn't rendered white as snow as soon as I started this process. I, made many of the same fuck ups that I was making in my first 10 years of sobriety, all the way up until 16 years of sobriety, and things have gotten better and better and better and better and better. Am I completely without defect today? No, I'm not completely without defect today. I still have thoughts that are off, but for the most part, I definitely am in the flow of life, because I've been practicing for the last 12 years of my sobriety how to be the blessing through starting with taking people through this book, 3 or 4 people a day, so to me that is a much more logical and easy and just simple way of working step 6 and 7, and of it making sense to me. Do I say the 7-step prayer today? Not really. I used to a lot, but I don't really. I just basically ask God, in my own words, like, how can I be the blessing in this moment? Please remove whatever's getting in the way of that, which is essentially a version of the 7-step prayer. But do I do that a lot? No, because I'm typically already doing that anyway, like in my actions, because I've set up my life today where I'm just working with so many people that I don't really have too much time today to be thinking about myself, and the more that I practice that behavior, the more intuitively that I understand how to be the blessing today, which kind of gets more into the 9-step promises. But that's really how those steps work for me. It's that simple. That's really all I have to share on that, to be honest with you. I know that, we want to complicate things and get into details, but the truth is that life is really simple. We're either practicing being the blessing or not. Practicing being the blessing feels a lot better than not. We're either in self or we're not, and being selfless and thinking of others and how we can help their needs and how we can contribute to this world just feels better. It's an easier path, and we are blessed to be alcoholics and we're blessed to be addicts because basically the universe said, here's a book, here's a way to practice that, So that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Thanks, Michaelis.
Thanks, Michaelis.
That was awesome. I've got thoughts on everything he said, but I'll open the floor up and let somebody else speak if you have any questions or comments. And if not, then you can listen to me. Well, I'll share next. So really appreciate everything that you said, Michaelis. I mean, I just love how the message is always grounded in working with others as the solution. And I found that to be true for myself, that just getting out of myself, getting out of my head, getting out of my problems by, working with others in the book process, it just changes me. And, I mean, the whole purpose of why we do everything is it's a God-powered personality change. And that happens over time when I recondition myself from being selfish and self-centered and consumed with myself to having space for others in my life. And like he said, thinking about their needs and everything. I did want to ask you, Michaelis, so, talking about, I mean, we can't remove our defects. We can't change ourselves. If we could, we would have, that's why it's a God-powered personality change. And the book talks about that too, with the resentments, right? That really struck me as something I never saw before in my 20 whatever years of AA until this book study. It's at the bottom of whatever, I think 66, where it says we can't wish the defects away, something like that. I just read it last night with somebody, but I wonder if you have anything to add about, how does resentments fit into this same idea? Because we can't wish our resentments away.
Yeah, it says we cannot wish them away any more than alcohol, and again, it boils down to being the blessing. It's really hard to resent people when you are trying to bless them. And the more people that you work with, look, there's not that many personalities in this world. Okay. There's just a few, and they've got different names and they've got different faces. So because I've got to work with so many people, I've definitely worked with my mother before. I've definitely worked with my father before. I definitely worked with that kid who made fun of me in school before. I definitely worked with, the kids who molested me when I was 4. I've worked with all different kinds of people today, and sitting across from somebody in the capacity of trying to be the blessing to them because there's this book between us with the solution has brought a lot of healing and compassion to relationships and resentments that I thought I could never heal from. So that's one aspect of it. But again, the other side of it is that, letting go of that anger typically comes from, the detachment that comes from working with as many people as you possibly can. When I'm working with a bunch of people and I'm repeating the idea of, if I really understand who I am, I, the light of God, my spirit will be joyful at all times. And I also am understanding that the person in front of me is a light of God and everything around me is a light of God. Then all those little roles and assignments, which come with expectations, which breed resentment, disappear because they just become another being. They just become another being of light. That's it. So that's really helped in terms of like lifting resentment, in terms of resentment being, the number one offender. When I'm resenting you, I'm not trying to bless you, and my drive to bless needs to be bigger than my own resentment, which means that it needs to be bigger than my pride. So God, please bury my pride before my pride buries me, which is a really great prayer to use, because when I'm resenting someone, I'm basically digging my own hole, because if I'm not trying to bless you, then I've lost an opportunity to connect to God. And I know for sure 100% that when I'm not connected to God, that's when the spiritual malady creeps in. So I may not have any, weirdness around you, but because I'm cutting off that opportunity over here, I'm sensing, and experiencing depression and anxiety and fear and worry and anger and jealousy and feeling lost and purposeless and all this stuff over here. And that stuff, even though it might sneak in really slowly, becomes super overwhelming, and that's where I get to those places where, I'm sober 5-7 years and I want to kill myself. And it's because I've let that spiritual malady, turn into the monster that it really is. So again, I basically treat that through treating the spirit, which is again through helping others, which again lifts the resentments for many different reasons. You know, a lot of the times I just don't have time to think about my resentments towards people because, you know, I'm launched into the moment through helping others. So again, yeah, helping others is really like the foundation of everything. It is that simple, you know. So I hope that answered your question. If there's more detail to your question, I'm here to answer it, but that's the vague answer.
Amazing. Totally get it. Totally agree. I really like what you said about like not judging ourselves, that it takes time to change, because I'm coming up against that. I'm kind of going into like going a little, like I've been high for so long on, you know, just this new life as a result of this work. And I mean, I can't expect to be, well, I guess I can be expect to be like high every minute, but whatever, I'm not right now. And I mean, I have this horrible resentment at my mother that I feel consumed by and I want it gone. And I'm, you know, arguing with reality that, you know, I should be further along with all this work that I've done, like that same old story. So you mentioned that when you talked earlier about it. And yeah, just wanting to analyze what's wrong, what am I not doing right? And it's like, no, I haven't been doing this very long. And yet I want to compare myself to you, who you've been doing this more than a decade. And I think that's a normal human thing. We do that. It's always like looking at where we're going. And so I was talking to a person I'm working with last night, and we were talking about this. And I said, well, okay, where were you 6 months ago when we started this book study? Compare yourself to that person, that you. Are you better than you were 6 months ago? And she was like, oh my God, yes, like, you know, and all these amazing things. So I get to do that for myself too, instead of comparing myself to this never ending future person. Like, look at where I was, you know, 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, whatever ago. So.
At 4 years into this book study work for me, like I, you know, created massive amounts of wreckage. You know, I got in yet another relationship with a girl that I definitely was not in love with. And I had a baby with her, and she, you know, left the country because I didn't want to be in a relationship with her. And, you know, I had cheated on her. I actually like invited some of her friends to come over and fight me. Like I was crazy, you know, I had like nuts times, you know, but the only difference was between like that time and all the crazy shit that I did before then was that I like didn't hate myself as much through it. You know, I didn't shame myself as much because like, even though I had these moments of rage and these moments of, you know, judgment towards myself, I was working with so many people that I was just, I couldn't think to myself, wow, Michaelis, you're a total fucking asshole and you don't belong on this earth. Because, you know, I was working with 4 or 5 people a day at that point in my life where it's like, you know, I was helping people and I just understood that this is the balance of where I'm at today. And if I just keep doing this work, I just had faith that this stuff would go away at some point, because I started to see the logic in it at that point, you know, already. And I started, like you guys are experiencing already, if you're working with people, I did start to get relief already from doing the process. So I knew that there was some magic in it, you know, and so that definitely helped me. I just didn't slip into that same sort of morbid reflection, you know, self-loathing abyss that I used to slip in over behavior that led me to places of wanting to kill myself, or, you know, I'm sure some people want to just get high, you know. I'm lucky that I never wanted to get high because I knew that would just compound the problem. But yeah, I always wanted to die, basically. So I just want to let you guys know that like this has not been like I started the book work and everything was like perfect. I was an animal for a while, you know. So yeah.
Well, that's what, you know, that's the power of the message, our vulnerability. We're not, you know, we just show up how we are. And that's the hope too. I mean, I always say we're messy humans. And that piece about the self-love and acceptance, it's like there's a little bit, even within this space of judgment and shoulds, it's like, but there is still, it's there a little. So that's what I get to focus on. It is, so that's the personality change right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there's some things that I had to accept in the moment. Like my son, who's now 20, for a period of time when all that stuff was going down, you know, he was spending time with my ex and my parents, and he basically stopped talking to me, you know, for like 8 or 9 months, you know, because that was the experience he was having. And, you know, he was in judgment of me, and I just needed to sort of let that go and delve more into helping people. And, you know, 9 months later, he called me and he said, "I'm really sorry. You know, I've been poisoned by these people, you know, your parents included in my life. And I love you, Dad." And I mean, right now, I mean, we have an amazing relationship. It's so, so close, you know, which is something that we always had. My parents, they don't talk to me, you know, but I'm okay with that, because the idea of the roles and the titles that they have in my life as being mom and dad have been removed through this process, you know, where I just see them as beings of light. And I basically, through this process, you know, developed criteria for the people that I make effort in to keep in my life, right? Because I live in Bali, they live in LA. So I need to make a conscious decision to actually pull things into my life and pull people into my life, right? So what am I going to make that decision on? Well, they need to meet one of the two criteria. The first thing is, can I be the blessing to you? You know, can I serve you in some way? Now, I can't serve my parents because they're not open to me serving them, because they have a perception of me that I'm powerless over. You know, they don't see me for who I am today. They see me based on a judgment that they developed about me, you know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, whatever. Or maybe my mom developed it when I was still high and didn't show up to my grandfather's, you know, deathbed. You know, there's a deep resentment there. And the other criteria is, you know, do they love and support me unconditionally? Now, it's a lot harder to find people that meet that criteria, but you will find those people. Like, I have people in my life today that love and support me unconditionally. They absolutely exist. But there's a lot of people that I can bless, you know? So those are the criteria that I keep for, you know, who I'm actually making the effort to keep in my life today, you know, and everybody else, I just let it be. You know, I don't have to mix with everybody, and I'm comfortable with that, you know, because I have plenty of people in my moment to moment basis to serve and to show up for. So why would I pull something into my life that brings me feelings of negativity if they don't meet some very simple criteria, which goes to everything, you know? Right now I'm sitting alone in my house, in my living room. Well, I've got my cats, my girlfriend's sleeping in the bedroom, and everything is super peaceful. You know, I hear the priest ringing his prayer bell in the distance, and everything is cool. But I can get on social media and I can start looking at the restrictions of what's happening in Bali. And I can start looking at this, you know, anti-Bule sentiment of like the Bules who aren't wearing masks and the Indonesians who hate the Bules for that. And I can look at what's happening with, you know, because I'm supposed to go to America in a week, about the vaccination rules and all this different stuff. And I can literally pull that insanity and place it in this moment and get spun out if I choose to do that. But I choose not to do that. And what a beautiful blessing it is right now to be able to launch myself into the present moment by being here with you guys, trying to be the blessing, you know? And that's really how this program works, over and over and over again. You know, just living my divine purpose over and over and over again, which allows me the biggest and greatest sense of peace, you know? So I know I kind of went off on a little bit of a thing, but that's that.
No, it's awesome. I just read last night too, with that same person, rocketed into the fourth dimension and having a discussion about what the fourth dimension actually is, and which is the present moment, as we talk about here. So love all of that. I did have, I wonder if you can speak about, you talked about the roles of parents and removing that label. So what if somebody has resentments at family that they really feel because of this role, people should or shouldn't be a certain way or do certain things because they're mother or father? How do you deal with that in the resentment inventory or the fifth step?
Well, that just boils down to a perception, right? That we're holding on to, right? I have an expectation that my mother should love and support me unconditionally. And that expectation basically, dictated how I felt about her for years, you know? And one of the things that we talk about early on in the book is the pause, and understanding that in that pause, we have a choice. And that in that choice, we get to choose our perception of life, right? And we get to choose based on our perception choice, how we feel about life, and based on our feeling choice, how we experience life, right? So everything boils down to that. Now, me and myself, I did not have the power of choice. That's what powerlessness is, right? That's why lack of power is dilemma. So connecting to God and accessing the power of God allows me to implement that power of choice. Now, the pause is a practice. The more that I practice that pause in every situation and try to see things from a different perspective is really important. The other thing I can do in that pause is call somebody and ask them to help me see a different perspective. But then, I need to have people around me who are not about the middle of the road solution. I need to have people around me who want to help me have a spiritual experience or that personality change. So my life has been about a lot of pausing, a lot of reaching out to people, and then intuitively knowing what the new perception was and basically applying that newfound power of choice to, choosing whether or not I want to hold on to this perception of the role that you play in my life. Just like, let's say I want to perceive you as my student only. Well, then I'm never going to learn anything, So I just look at this as an opportunity to be the blessing. That's it. And what comes out of it, I learned so much from the people that I work with. It is mind blowing, but if I shut myself off based on, perception I'm holding on to, then I'm basically sitting in closed-mindedness, and that's going to bar any opportunity for spiritual growth. Same thing for in my parents' stuff, at some point I need to be able to just look at them as human beings suffering from the human condition like the rest of us. We're prey to all the same defects of character that I am living the blessing where I actually have a textbook that, allows me to practice something that, relieves me of those defects of character. But these people are basically just bumbling around this earth trying to figure shit out and having emotional attachments to all kinds of shit that doesn't even fucking matter, because their purpose is their family, or their purpose is their children, or their purpose is their money, or their purpose is the job, or their purpose is the relationships that they're in, and when your life is tethered to that, there is no stability, so that's basically how I would talk to somebody and just allow them, suggest to them to be open-minded to having a new experience with this stuff and to have a new perspective, and, asking God to grant you those things, pray for it, pray for the willingness, that's an important part of this process, and again, your desire to access the power of God by which you can live needs to be greater than your desire to hold on to any perception. Do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? That's an old adage that we hear in the fellowship. And I personally am choosing happiness, and again, it boils down to, if I really understand who I am, I have the light of God, and my spirit will be joyful at all times. So I need to be willing to, be the blessing no matter what it takes, because that is the promise of constant joy. And maybe it's because I had such a dark, early sobriety that joy carries so much weight for me. I will do anything for it, today. So that's why I keep up with this practice, basically. And look, if you're stuck in that place in that resentment, just keep practicing the work. That shit will lift over time. You know, it will happen when it happens. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Keep working with as many people as you can. And I promise you at some point, you will be sitting across from that person that you won't let go of that resentment with. They'll have a different name and a different face, and you'll see them from a different light because you'll be doing this work with them.
Awesome. So does anybody have anything they want to share? Reflections, questions, comments?
Does anyone want to argue? It'll be fun. It's like, you know what I mean? You guys can talk shit. No, nobody? Come on. Where's the defiant people? We're all healthy now or something. It's weird.
Hey guys, I have a question. Just my name's Kelly. I'm an alcoholic. I'll turn my video off. Hi everyone. Yeah, hi. Thank you for all of that information. I came in a little bit late to the meeting, but I just want to know your thoughts about, like, I'm in my step 4 and I'm like still got a little bit more to go because I have so many resentments. But I just wanted to ask what you guys think about, because, you know, I hear about how many people you guys work with, and I guess I have 2 questions. One, when would you recommend putting your hand up to be a sponsor? Like, would you recommend that it's not, you don't do that until you've done the 12 steps? And because I mean, personally, I feel like that I'd feel more comfortable once I've done the 12 steps, but it has been suggested at different times that, you know, if someone approached me and said that they wanted me to sponsor them, then of course I would say yes. But that leads me to my next question, and that is, you know, like, we want to work with others, but if other people don't approach us to say, you know, I want you to be my sponsor, or I want you to do the work with me, then, you know, how else can I work with others, I guess, is my question. So 2 questions. Hope that's clear.
Cool. I'm going to start with your second one. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
All right, cool. So that tradition, our public relations, you know, being attraction rather than promotion, like, that's been like taken out of context, right? So basically what they're saying is that that's the guidelines for our public relations, not our relations within Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So this idea of getting through the 12 steps and then all of a sudden being magically attractive, where people are going to like come and want what you have because you've like had this epic spiritual experience, that's almost an impossibility, you know, because it's impossible to have a spiritual experience or God-powered personality change unless you've been practicing action that's contrary to the root of your problem. The root of your problem is selfishness and self-centeredness. The contrary action will have to be selflessness, you know, and altruism. So that's why, like, reading the foreword to the 2nd edition is so important, you know, because it really talks about how the original members did this thing. You know, like, Bill went to a detox and went in there and asked the doctor, can I pass this message on to people? He went to bars and, you know, to like the Skid Row of the area and went and just like grabbed people. I mean, these people were proactively looking for people to work with, you know, and there were no 12 steps at the time. There was only like this half-assed word of mouth message that people were passing on, you know. So this idea that you have to have a certain amount of time sober, or you need to have a working knowledge of the 12 steps, is off. It's where the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous has really like fallen short in terms of the message that's being passed. It's been diluted over the last, you know, 80 some years or whatever. So that's just a perception that you're going to have to let go of. It's not done that way. That's one thing. The other thing is that how I did it was, I realized that I needed to work with people if I wanted to experience this joy, and I needed to have a spiritual experience. So basically, the first part of your question was when. Immediately, as soon as I got like a few pages, I immediately passed it on. Now I was, I had a little bit of time, and I was working with like 4 people at the time, but not really. They were like call and check-in people. But essentially I was a newcomer, because this was the first time I had ever heard this information. I mean, even though I had 10 years, like I didn't know shit. So basically I asked the people that I was working with, like, yo, I'm doing this new thing. I know we haven't done the steps in a while or whatever, but are you willing to like try this thing with me, as I do it, so I can practice it? And they were like, cool. And then I, forced myself to go to more meetings, which at that point in my life, I fucking hated meetings, and I hated the fellowship. You know what I mean? I really could not stand alcoholics, and then I would like force myself to go to hang out with people at diners, at all hours in the morning, to build rapport with other people, and get to know the people at meetings again, because I had not really liked meetings or people at meetings. And I'll tell you, like in the very beginning, that part sucked. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have been to a diner at 2 a.m. with a bunch of alcoholics, and when it comes time to get that check, and everyone is like hounding the waitress to literally split the bill down to the cent, and like get fucking crazy about that. I mean, that shit drove me crazy at that time, but I endured that because I knew that that's what I needed to do. So basically how it worked was, I'd hear some cool shit about the circle and the triangle, and I would just like talk about that stuff. Be like, oh my God, you hear what I fucking learned? Or, I'd hear about like Bill Wilson taking acid, and I'd be like, bro, did you know about Bill Wilson taking acid? I'd just learn about these new sort of tidbits of like, the history of the program, or how the program actually works, or whatever. And I would just share that like sort of nonchalantly. People would be interested in it. And I'd be like, do you want to go through it with me? It's really cool. Some people were like, I have a sponsor. And I'd be like, I'm not trying to sponsor you. Let's just go through the book, So I really separated the idea of sponsorship, which, comes with this connotation of like, you have to be their fucking guru or life coach or the omniscient fucking like being with all the answers, to just being the guy who like takes people through the book. Because basically that's how I'm treating myself. That's how I'm working the program. And I need to make sure that that shit's covered. So I just became the book guy. And when you remove that responsibility of being the life coach, then anybody can do it. It's only when people have like made their sponsor the point of, all things questioned about life, where you like put this pressure for this person to be somewhere that truthfully, none of us are. None of us have this thing. We're all fucking struggling and trying to figure this shit out. And that's another beautiful thing about the very first part of the book. This process is not to make me depend on the sponsor, but to enable me to become dependent upon God. A sponsor can't save himself, right? Or herself. So it's basically removing that whole idea, just about being, taking someone through the book. If you've got 3 pages in the book, you've got 3 pages more than somebody else. It doesn't matter about time, it doesn't matter about anything. And I also realized that, the stuff that I was learning in the book was stuff that people with 30 plus years did not know, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm experiencing that today. I'm working with someone who, truthfully, like when I grew up in LA sobriety, I venerated her. I thought she was like the most epic fucking godsend ever, mm-hmm. And she's working with me now, just because like the stuff that we're learning is so deep and so powerful, and most people don't get it. So it sort of removes that idea of time, and you just kind of jump in and do it right away, and you're good. And that is the only way that you're going to get to that place of being attractive enough to have people coming to you, right? Because it's only through working with other people that you get to have that spiritual experience where you become that person, right? So that's it, basically.
Cool, thank you. And that's what I had been told as well before, but I think the further I get away from doing work daily and regularly, which I haven't in the last couple of months, then I guess the more sort of unworthy in a way I would feel if someone did, say, which I'm not assuming anyone's going to say, would you like to be my sponsor or work with me or whatever, but I actually just feel like I haven't been connected enough lately to kind of be able to, help anyone really in a way. Like, but anyway, thanks. It does answer my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I'd also like to say that I've always driven for, when I get to be good enough and perfect enough, then I'll have something to say. But what I really relate to when I'm in a meeting, for example, and hear somebody sharing from their vulnerability and their imperfection, that is what I actually find attractive, because it speaks to me about all of that stuff that I don't really want to own about myself, and allows me to think, oh, it's okay just to be who I am right now. I don't have to be that perfect person. And that vulnerability is much more attractive than the person who's got their shit together completely, to me anyway.
Yeah.
Totally. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Kelly. Good to see you.
Good to see.
So one thing that Michaelis says, so it's like, okay, well, if we get to go find people, if we're not just waiting for them to ask us, well, how do you do that? So, what he talks about, and whatever, Michaelis, correct me if I'm bastardizing your words, but that we go to meetings to find people to help. The whole purpose of meetings shifts. I mean, for decades, for me, I need a meeting. Oh, I'm having a bad day. I need a meeting. I need to go to get something out of it because I'm not feeling good. When I go to meetings like that, it's always a disaster, because then I'm wanting to control, and I'm like, they're wasting my time. Like, I want to hurry up and get to me. Or if I'm the one, like, I bring up the topic, oh, I'm doing so shitty, then I'm judging all the shares back. I mean, it's a shitty headspace to be in. So whenever I go to the meeting on alert, who here can I ask to take through the big book? And I have, I call it my spidey sense on for the book. And it's happened a number of times. And I just get this nudge from higher power or whatever. And then I'll ask the person, hey, do you want to do a big book study, after the meeting? And of course, I always will announce it. I mean, it's my program in my life. So during my share, I'll likely talk about it. And if I am looking for people at the end, I'll be like, yeah, if anybody wants to do this book study, get with me after the meeting. I'm happy to share my info. And I also go into Facebook groups. I'll make comments. I mean, there's so many places to find people. So
yeah, especially now with Zoom too. And again, that's really awesome that you talked about the perspective change at meetings, because when you're going to meetings for a couple of decades of your life, it's really easy to judge the speakers and judge the sharers and get really upset for that one person that always talks 4 minutes past the timer, and which when you start going to international meetings, you'll hear more and more of. But when you're there with an actual purpose, which is just to be the blessing and find somebody to help, it sort of removes that whole idea. The other thing I'll say is that if you're brand new with days of sobriety, one of the things that I suggest to people is to really tap into your alcoholic/drug addict manipulative self and really understand that your life depends on this work. So go to old timers, go to people with a lot of time and say, hey, can I practice this with you? So that way, just whatever it takes to try to find people to work with, so that way, you're at least doing what you need to do to not only just stay sober, but, recover mind, body, and spirit. Just get creative with it. That's all.
I love that you said that, because I don't know if my friend in Thailand wants to speak about that, but there's a couple people I work with where they have less time. And even my friend last night that I keep mentioning, she was like, oh, I've got a friend of mine. We're going to do the book together. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Because there's this propensity, you want to do a big book study, but if you're the newcomer, then the other person, if they have more time, they'll think that they're the ones that are going to be helping you. So I think it's really important, if you are approaching, to be very clear that I would like to take you through this specific process in this way that I will show you, because this will help me do my, carry the message and do my service work instead of, she was like, well, I think we're just going to, do it together and she'll probably say stuff too. And I was like, well, I would really invite you to like nip that in the bud and say, can I share this with you? What do you think about that?
I mean, I personally would not be like that rigid, especially like in that dynamic, because, people's like pride gets in the way sometimes, especially with time. So I would definitely invite conversation around this stuff. But I guess like the boundary of like going through the book in this specific way is important. But I wouldn't be that rigid about you need to listen to me kind of thing. I mean, it's definitely a discussion, it's definitely a process. And like I said, I've learned a lot of stuff from, working with people from all different like amounts of time. And I didn't keep it that rigid, and I've worked with a lot of people who've got twice the amount of time that I do, or just a little less than twice. So it's definitely more of a discussion, and some people want to be like taken through it teacher student style. So it's really just sort of, as long as like you're not jumping around and doing stuff out of order, and you're literally starting from the beginning and going through it as the process goes, so that you get every ounce of information, and you're talking about the things you underline and highlight, and the prayers and stuff that you write. Yeah, one way to do it is just say, hey, you should get a clean big book, clean hardcover 4th edition, so they know that they're embarking on a new process every time. Because I've had people, well, I've got this big book, this 3rd edition that I've had since I was 20 years sober. That's cool, but let's have a new experience with it. So that's another way to sort of invite a new process.
So what I hear you saying is like, and maybe I did come across as rigid, but you are saying we want to share the highlights and the underlines and start on the title page and write the prayers, but it doesn't mean that like the other person can't bring their own feedback, of course. But if we're the one share, we want them to write the stuff and do it in this method.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome.
What was your question about step 11, by the way?
Oh, the step 11 question. Well, she's not here, but that's okay, because it still was compelling to me because, I've only done step 11 with you that one time, and it really, it was hard for me to kind of articulate the stuff that you said about it, about the things being a suggestion. So those of you who may or may not know, I'm sure a lot of you do, but like step 11 has like the upon awakening stuff. We do all these certain things, and then at night we review our day. And, could you just speak on your thoughts on that?
Yeah, those are basically misconstrued usually as 10-step exercises. But the truth is that those are just suggestions for meditation, right? Now, I don't follow any of those suggestions because they're telling me at night to review my day, but don't slip into morbid reflection. I don't know about you guys, but if I start reviewing my day and going over all the mistakes that I made, I'm going to slip into like, wow, Michaelis, you're a real piece of shit, right? And in terms of upon awakening, look at my plan for the day. I basically found that like having plans sort of gets in the way of like all the sort of gifts that could be coming that I'm going to plan myself out of, So I don't really do that. I have my schedule of the people that I'm working with, and sometimes they show up and sometimes they don't. And I don't care if they do or they don't, because, whatever the plan is whatever happens. So I don't do that either. I basically encourage the people that I work with. If that works for them, awesome. But find whatever works for you in terms of a meditation practice. For the first, 6 years of my sobriety, DJing was my meditation practice. and then, it was exercise of some sort. And then it became like a Vedic meditation practice that I was introduced to around 8 years. And then when I moved to Bali, it's, a Balinese Hindu practice, so it just keeps evolving and changing, and pick whatever you want. That's basically my take on that. But you don't have to be so rigid about, and it says in the book, like, these are suggestions. It's not law about what to meditate on, basically.
These are suggestions about the meditation part, but there's other things that are very much specific to follow.
Totally.
Yeah, thanks. That's exactly what I was wanting you to clarify. Who else? Anybody else?
I need to go now, so I just want to say thank you very much, guys, for sharing your everything, and it's been wonderful. So look forward to another time.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Hi, I'm Ushi. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Ushi.
Just a quick question to the columns in step 4. I've done it different ways. First I write the names, and then I write the resentments. And then do I actually go horizontal or vertical? You know what I mean? Like, do I go, that's the resentment and what's affected, and that's my part in it? Or I write the names, then I write all the resentments, and then I go what's affected, and then I go what do you call it, and what's my part in it? Because I find it quite overwhelming if I go that way, because I get lost in my part, So I did it both different ways, and I just wanted to know what's your take on it, or does it matter?
I think whatever works for each individual to get it done is the answer to that question. I think making the list first is the most important thing, so that there is a beginning and an end. Because if the list itself is not done, then it's very overwhelming. You can go on and like add names, and just you'll never get it done. But having the list first is really cool. I personally, once I had the list done, I go all the way across. That's how I personally do it. And I think, like, because the my part section is broken down into 3 really specific questions, it makes it easier than to try to figure out like just what my part is, like, okay, cool, where was I at fault in that relationship? Like, where was I dishonest or selfish or, hurtful in that relationship, or jealous or whatever, the second question being, how I behave the same way that I resent them for, looking for the hypocrisy of my own actions, so I can sort of develop compassion and not judge them for the harms that I feel like it caused me because I behaved the same way in my past. And then the last one, of course, is, how am I using this resentment to, holding on to this resentment to serve me, But yeah, I mean, I would definitely just go across.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
However you want.
Thanks, Sushi.
So yeah, on that note, where do you recommend that we actually answer those 3 specific questions every time? So instead of just saying, because I just so want to get through my step 4, so sometimes it's like, oh, I don't know what to write there, and so I'll just go, okay, I'll just say, yes, I have lied before, I have behaved in that way before, but I won't answer the 3 questions. I might just answer 1. So do you recommend that I definitely answer the 3 to all of them, to each of the resentments?
Yeah, I mean, I would answer the 3 questions, and really it's not have I, but it's how have I. So looking at the details of your behavior in the past. The last question might be more challenging to apply to every single resentment. So the last question about how am I using this resentment to serve me is more applied to those resentments that feel like trauma, where things have like happened to you that maybe you don't have a specific part in. Like, for instance, I was molested when I was 4 by a bunch of kids, right? So for me, just thinking my part was that I was there doesn't really help me grow in any way, but how holding on to that resentment to serve me, right? So basically, I've used it to justify and rationalize promiscuity. I've used it to, not trust men. I've used it to, justify emotional unavailability. I've used it to seek out sympathy from people and to people and I've used it to not grow in areas because I thought I was damaged goods, right? So seeing how I'm still in a prison that I've imposed on myself based on holding on to this resentment.
Okay, that means I've got a lot more work to do, Michaelis.
All right. That's good though.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you for clarifying that.
No worries.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks for asking. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got a bit of a question. It's just sort of a big picture question. Like you said, we're in the book, in different parts of the book at all times with different people, but are we continually doing a fourth and a fifth as well? Or is that a one-time thing to be, then like a 10th, etc.?
Natalie, do you want to answer that or?
Oh, I was waving.
Oh, okay, you're just waving. Okay. I personally haven't,
yeah, right.
I felt like my 10th step is really sort of taking care of a lot of that.
Yeah. Okay.
Once I actually understood what a 10th step was, and I feel like dedicating my life to helping others has really sort of lessened my need for writing another inventory today,
Okay.
So but everyone's going to be different. Like if you're brand new and things are like piling up on you within your first 5 years, 10 years or whatever, and you want to do a big inventory again, do it. You know what I mean? Like there's no rule.
Yeah, not really. No, this is my third or fourth. So hopefully
I mean, what I learned is
but yeah, I just, because some people say, no, you only have to do your fifth once, and then other people say, no, it's a good process to, continually be on that wheel. But yeah, I just wondered in terms of this process.
I mean, the fourth step and the fifth step are not the end all be all steps that people make them out to be. They're just another exercise in more self-knowledge, and self-knowledge really avails us nothing. So it brings us awareness, which is awesome, but that's not necessarily the healing. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I mean, we can definitely, if you haven't done a thorough inventory, with somebody, I definitely suggest it. Like my very first inventory that I was told to do, I had a guy who had 25 years that was working with me, and he was like, just write your first 15 people that come to mind, and you'll learn everything from there. And truthfully, in retrospect, I understand what you're saying, but in that moment, I'm offloading. So my next inventory was like 196 resentments, and then I did that big Hazelton one after that, and then one more after that when I did this process. And now it's like there's not really any more stones that I'm going to be uncovering,
Yeah.
Everything's been out on the table. It's a matter of like, okay, cool, am I doing the work to heal or not?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Caroline.
Mm.
Good morning. Good morning. Hi.
Good morning, Slaughter.
Hi. Love this meeting. It's awesome. Nice to see you guys. And yeah, I just love everything Big Book study related. It's definitely working in my life, and that's thanks to Natalie passing it on to me, and Michaelis passing it on to her, and I'm sharing it with others who beautifully were at this meeting today. We're all at a detox retreat, so it's yeah, it's nice. We're doing a liver and gallbladder flush. So it's nice to be able to discuss the other thing that we've got in common as well, which is the Big Book study. Yeah, it's great in regards to working with other people. For me personally, like I don't know, I got a little bit book study happy, you know, like it was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna work with these, and I was just making myself available at meetings, like when they say, is there any AA related announcements, like, oh, I can do a big book study one-to-one with people if they're interested. And surprisingly, some, you know, quite a lot of people were, they did not sure what it was about, but just that whole working with another alcoholic when people have got so much time on their hands, you know. So that's been amazing. The process, I must have attached so many expectations to what it was going to be about, because I have my experience with Natalie, you know, and it's like, you know, this is, we keep having these moments, you know, and it's not always that fluid, you know, and I've come to realize that it's different with everybody. It's, you know, and I have to try and step away from what I kind of anticipate it to be and just let it flow, because it's like the book and God doing the work, rather than, even though I'm doing the work to turn up and that other person's doing the work to turn up. Yeah, some of the things that have come out of it have just been mind-blowing, you know, the connections to people who've got like 16, 20 years of sobriety, and who've kind of thought that, you know, they've hung up their addictions and whatever, and they've been in the book a million times, but yet I'm sitting there with somebody who's just mind blown about this book that they feel like they've only just started reading, you know. It's like, I never saw that. So it's an amazing experience, and it is definitely changing how I work with other people, like in the study, but also like in everyday life. Because there's some people I work in the book with who I would have never even considered talking to, you know, like my judgments just come in straight away, like, but I can kind of see through doing the work with people who I would genuinely think, oh, they're arrogant, or they have too much pride, or they're trying to control the situation. And it's like, okay, so they're the things I have to work on for sure. Like, I'm going in there for also research purposes as well on myself, you know, so it's good. It's unearthing quite a lot, and the connections you can have with people are just unreal, you know, on a different level to going to meetings and so, you know, I've only really got to where are we now? There's a solution, I think. So we're not actually like too far into it. And the lady I'm working with also, she's hot on my heels, so I need to get a move on. But it's like, I know Natalie's been there. It's like the excitement of getting it done, but also knowing that it happens in the time that it's supposed to happen, which is like everything in life, right? You know, it's just, I need to be patient with myself, other people, and just with what, you know, what is intended. So yeah, in regards to the step 5 stuff, I've just finished a like second round of steps, not finished obviously, but for me, I would like to do it again, you know. Like the first time round wasn't super, it was thorough, but it was all chaotic. And then the second time round I was like, oh, okay, so this is what I can handle now. And then maybe the third time round, I might do it the NA way, but either way, it's all coming from the book. So, but I do have a desire to knock things off, that because things don't generally surface in that moment, you know. But through doing the book study and being in Bill's story with people, things have started to surface again, you know. And I'm like, oh, okay, so there's another one, and there's another one. So I really like that. The book study brings up things for me that maybe I'm ready for now, but I weren't ready for then. So I'm super grateful for it, and just want to say thank you.
Hello. Ushi, my internet. Hello, my internet. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My internet's messing up. Thank you, Sarah. Michaelis, did you have something to say? I don't know. I think I dropped for a minute.
No, I mean, I don't think there was a question. It was just like an expression. So it was awesome. Thank you. I'll say that.
Well, and Sarah is the one who we are going to have on our podcast in a couple days.
Awesome.
Or it's tomorrow. So we'll be meeting again tomorrow for that. So there was a snapshot. And yeah, I'll take this moment to plug our podcast. I mean, likely you all know about it, but just in case you don't, Michaelis and I are hosting a podcast about the Big Book Study, and it's awesome. And we're just basically doing this and having people on as guests, and we're interviewing them and the changes that they've seen in their lives as a result of the Big Book Study. So yeah, we've had 2 episodes out now. We're slowly releasing them. I put the link in our Big Book Study WhatsApp group. And so, yeah, it's on all podcasts and all that stuff. So anyway, anybody else? Nope. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been awesome. Thank you, Michaelis, for agreeing to come, and for all my friends and people and that have come and participated, asked questions, and shown up. Thanks for everything.